And as I say, action. Welcome to Courtney on Health with Courtney and Maxine. Maxine, it's up to you now.
Yeah, hi me. Hi Courtney, hi
Hi, me.
Malcolm, and welcome again. Hey, hi to me. Uh
Hi, me. I know him
so
well.
there's a song I'm gonna start off with. I don't know if I'm gonna sing it, but I could. Anyway, it's called Apple Peaches Pumpkin Pie, and it's by a group called Jay and the Techniques, and it was 1966. And it's just the beginning. It was just like apple, peaches, pumpkin pie. You were young and so was I. Now that we're grown up, it seems you just keep ignoring me. The apple, peaches, pumpkin pie part is what really fits into this episode today. And so the Courtney will discuss the pros and cons of organic and conventional food and delve into which fruits and veggies are on the Dirty Dozen list, the 2021 list. It gets updated. And the question is, are apples or peaches on the list? Can we have that pumpkin pie in the fall? So big questions.
Yeah.
Uh, so Michael Pollan is a really wonderful author on food and diversity and everything. He wrote the book, one of the books, or two of the books he wrote, were This Is Your Mind on Plants and Botany of Desire. And he once said, "Don't eat anything your great grandmother wouldn't recognize as food." So everyone wants to feed their family the best quality foods possible within their budget. And while organic food is the buzzword for fresh, it's not always available and it can be quite pricey. So herein lies the conundrum. Is conventional food getting a bad rap as it comes from big ag? Is it okay to consume the veggies at the grocery store, which are not organic? There's been various independent studies over the years, including Stanford University and UC Davis, that indicate that there are no significant nutritional differences between food grown conventionally versus organically. Courtney's going to have to chime in on that. Yet the word organic equals healthier and fresher in most people's minds. When the relative costs are taken into account, the cost per unit of nutrient on conventional crops come out ahead, which is because price wise, I guess. Most nutritionists argue that it is more important for people to increase their consumption of fruits and vegetables, regardless of how they are grown, which can be controversial in some ways, I think. We should try to make improvements in all farming, including organic farming. According to Maria Rodale, author of numerous health publications and books on organic food, organics are something we can all partake of and benefit from. We should make organic a conventional choice, and it should not be the exception, and it shouldn't be available only to those with higher income level. So, on a good note, organic produce prices in certain stores have come down since consumer demand has been greater. And this will help everyone trying to choose organic more often. So, what are some of the facts that one needs to make the choice of organic versus conventional non organic foods? That is the question Courtney will answer in today's episode. So, Courtney, we're going to give this to you now. Can you define what organic means? I know it's more than just a chemistry term.
Yeah, I will certainly do the best that I can, but I do have to go back to one comment. I love Michael Pollan, but I have to chuckle at and I do like, I agree that if we don't recognize something, but I'm thinking about my grandmother and I growing up in an Italian family. If she were still alive today and she saw some of the kimchi or some of the other things that I were eating, she might not be able to recognize it, but they're still really, really good foods. So anyway.
There's a lot we don't recognize in the
Yeah, well,
foods.
I understand this point, and I'm
there
totally
was
with
something I won't eat anything that I can't pronounce. You
you.
have all these chemicals and things.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're gonna do a little crash course in sort of organics 101 and what it means to be certified organic. And it is something I'm hoping that some folks walk away from this with a little bit more information if they don't have great working knowledge of how the organic labeling works and really what to look for to make sure that if you're spending the money on an organic product, that you're really getting something that's organic. And fortunately, the labeling laws do help the consumer do that. So in order to get organic certification, okay, organic farmers and handlers, so anybody who's involved in the process. And this week we're going to talk about mostly produce and a little bit about some processed foods. Next week we're going to go into eggs, meat products, poultry, just to split it up a little bit. So whether you're a handler or a farmer, you have to, first of all, apply for an application, and then your farm has to be inspected annually in order to make sure that the practices are continued throughout the years. It is run through the U.S. Department of a very large organic program here. So most of the inspectors are actually sent from the Department of Agriculture, the USDA. So what they're looking for are things like pest management, weed management, animal welfare. So what's the condition of the animals on an organic farm? Soil quality. Are there uses of additives that might not be considered organic that are being used? So these are just some of the things they're looking in terms of the checklist of what's going to make up organic or not. So with clients, it's so much more than what we're putting in our bodies. It really reaches into what's the condition of our earth, ecology-wise, environmental-wise. So it is obviously what we're eating, but it's also a little bit more far-reaching than that. It's important to remember that when it comes to produce, in order for a farm to be considered or labeled as an organic farm, there's a look back period of about 3 years. So that soil needs to be these compounds that they're looking at, and it's anything from insecticides, pesticides, some of the more common synthetic insecticides and pesticides being used are prohibited in organic farming. So that 3-year look back period is to make sure that at harvest time, there's been at least a 3-year period in soil that hasn't seen any of those prohibited compounds. So you can't, if I'm the Courtney Gravenese farm and I wanted to become an organic farmer tomorrow, unless I meet their criteria and that soil has been completely absent of any of those compounds, I'd have to wait a 3-year period. So I think that's important. So for consumers to understand that, well, why doesn't every farm become organic overnight? And it isn't an overnight process. It takes a little bit of time. There's also a little bit of a price tag associated with it. So it's not just a one-off. It can be anywhere from a couple of $100s to a couple of thousands of dollars. So when we talk about local farming in a little bit, we'll get into that as well. For a local small farm, those annual costs might be hard for them to achieve. So I'm just putting that out there. There's a reason why some local farmers might not necessarily, although maybe using fewer pesticides, might not be able to carry the USDA organic label on it. So, a lot of that, it goes into the produce. We talked about there are no most synthetic fertilizers and pesticides are on the banned list when it comes to organic farming. Of note, though, there are some synthetic compounds that are approved for use. Things like pheromones are used in crops because it confuses the insects, so your crop might have less blight. Keep that in mind. Certain vaccines are acceptable even within the organic farms, organic ranches, even though they are considered quote unquote synthetic. On the flip side, there are naturally occurring toxic compounds that are banned. So for example, arsenic is a naturally occurring metal. Strychnine, a naturally occurring metal. These, although natural, exist in nature, are banned when it comes to organic farming. So you can see, although it's fairly, clear, sometimes there are a little bit of some gray areas in terms of it's not just what's natural versus things that are synthetic. There's a little bit of overlap in there. Right. Organic products with the label on it always means it's non-GMO. So for a consumer, if you see, and I'm going to show you some examples of the labels that are out there, the USDA seal that says, organic on it, that is your assurance that it is non-GMO. Those two are intertwined. Sometimes you'll see an additional non-GMO label on a product, but to be quite honest with you, it's unnecessary because that organic seal means it's non-GMO.
Courtney,
prohibited.
what is, can you explain what a GMO, what is GMO? People get very confused about what that is. And it's like, the definition would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So it stands for genetically modified organism. And it could be anything from a bacterium introduced into a food to help fight pests and fungus and things like that, which is, I will honest, it's one of the more common uses of GMOs in the products that are high in it. It could also mean gene splicing of certain foods. I don't know if you guys remember the flavor saver, their tomato food, we grow crops to make them higher in certain nutrition value. We'll introduce them into certain foods to get bigger crop yield. There are a variety of different purposes of it and mediums for it. So it's not always bacterium, it could be a gene as well. So you're absolutely right, Maxine, it is, and we're going to talk about this extensively. I'm hoping to get a colleague of mine on the show to talk. He's an entomologist, to get his perspective on it, but it once again is a very polarizing topic. We've got some people who feel adamantly about GMOs never being used, but there's also a wealth of scientific data saying it has been used, it is safe to use. But I think almost all individuals have a right to know if their food is GMO, has been modified or not. So I've always been a long proponent of at least the labeling behind it, because there are some issues. One of the issues that could exist with a GMO product would be for allergens. So if an allergen was introduced and the product's not labeled GMO, and it happens to be an allergen that was introduced into that product, somebody who has a very high level of reaction to that allergen could have an allergic response, and it could be, could not work out very well for them. So the labeling at least allows the consumer to know this is a product that, even if it's not organic, it could be. So for example, I'm just going to show you, if you guys can see on there, on this pretzel bag, it says they're non-GMO. So it's not organic, but the consumer knows no GMOs in here, and it may help in their purchasing. So I hope that clarifies a little bit the big umbrella of what they are, and the labeling behind it. I will tell you that over the next couple of years, we are going to see more of the GMO labeling, except it's going to move from the GMO, and it's going to indicate whether it's been bioengineered. So look for that going forward.
I think of Frankenstein, like first you hear genetically modified and you went, and then bioengineered, like, would I want to eat any of this? It's like, what? I mean, I'd be like, all I want is a carrot, please, just, it's just crazy.
I know. So, so a little bit about some processed foods that may contain organic ingredients. So the rules behind an organic ingredient. So I have a bunch of different examples here. So this is diced tomatoes. And even though it's minimally processed, this still falls under the category of a processed food, right? So the rules regarding organic processed foods are same as what we mentioned before. So any ingredient in that product has to follow the rules that we just mentioned. So no pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, non-GMO. But it also includes things like no artificial preservatives, artificial preservatives. It can include things like vitamin E and things like that that are preservatives but considered natural. No artificial color, no artificial flavor. So there's another layer of regulation when it comes to a processed food. All the ingredients need to be, if it has the 100% organic seal on it, all of the ingredients in that processed food have to be organic and follow those rules. So you can see why this is, it's a process. Somebody has to make sure that somebody's minding the hen house, right? So is everybody following the rules? We'd like to believe so. To your point, Maxine, stores like Costco, big chain grocery stores like Stop and Shop, ShopRite, because of consumer demand, have had an explosion in organic products on because of the demand. So even places like Costco and big chain, no matter what you think about big box stores and grocery stores, it makes it far more accessible for people to buy these products where they might not have been able to, afford them before.
Right.
So a little bit more availability, and that's a little bit about the rules about processed foods.
Yeah, one question, do the large stores like Costco or the markets, do they send out their own inspectors to make sure no?
They don't send out their own, it's all done from, which you got to think about. Do you really want the same person who's giving, which I'm better with that. I think it needs to be more objective. So I think it needs to be somebody who's removed, who comes in and does, remember, they're not going into the stores. They're going back from there. They're checking the farm. They're checking the processing plant, which is where it needs to occur. Because once it gets into a can, into the store, or for any of these things I have here, it's done at that point. You want to step back, and that's where the certification needs to.
Oh, right. I'm
What
just
about
saying,
stores that have their own brands, like, yeah, stores that have their own brands, like Whole Foods? They have
Right.
their own organic section,
Yes.
So are we to feel secure in the fact that that particular product, those products are being, are organic, true and true?
Yeah, you're going to look for, let's jump ahead to the labeling that's on there. So yeah, so you can have your own, you can be Whole Foods, you can be the Courtney Gravenese, tomato company, and have my own freestanding. It's not just the Whole Foods name on there that you're looking for. It's really the seal. What type of organic seal does it have on it? And it's important to also look for the certifying body. When I post this online, I'm going to give examples. So not only, for example, will you see an organic seal. So this USDA seal that's on here is the most common seal that you see. So it's the first thing you're going to look for. And in small print on any food that's organic, you're also going to see the certifying body. Those are the two things that consumers need to look for to make sure that what they're buying, if it is labeled organic, is organic. If it just says organic on it and you don't find either of those two items on there, it doesn't mean that it's not organic, but there's really no way for the consumer to know that somebody has actually approved it to be so. So, I'm an honest, I want to believe everybody's good, but for right now, if you're really spending that money, we need to rely on those two things in order to show that it's organic. Again, it doesn't mean a local farm won't be mostly organic, but without those seals, there's really no way of truly knowing.
So as a dietitian, what's your take on organic versus conventional? Like, if you can't buy organic for some reason, and there's lots of produce in the store that's conventional.
Yeah.
Nutritionally, is there a difference? Is there, aside from kind of the pesticide issue, and even that's kind of questionable now, what you just said. So how do we kind of skirt around that?
Right. Nutritionally, and I have done studies on this, and of course you'll always have people, who are on both sides, but they have done a significant amount of research. And from a pure nutrition perspective, there is little difference, vitamin content, carotenoid content from organically grown to conventionally grown. Now, I want to pull into the mix locally grown, because I think that's important, because I think for a lot of people, first of all, for the environment, it's great for us. Your food's not traveling nearly as far. It's usually just a couple of hours away. That could be a deal, could be something that's significant, because if a food is traveling less, miles, hours, days to get to you, those really volatile vitamins and mostly vitamins are more intact, and you lose less of the vitamin content. So there might be a benefit there, certainly from a nutrition perspective.
How about the effects that some of the pesticides have on our body?
Right.
Like if they're spraying the plant with certain pesticides that are bad for us, how much do we take in, and how much is harmful?
Right. So there's an acceptable amount, and this is one of the things. So we can jump ahead to the where the Dirty Dozen list comes from, the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen list comes from. So that is derived from, once again, USDA data based on EPA standards. So the EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency. So they've set the standards, they test it. So the Environmental Working Group is a watchdog group. So they pull that information and come up with this list every year. But the standards are set by the EPA. So there's a certain part per million that they consider a safe amount. Above that amount, they would consider that being an issue. But below that amount, they consider to be a reasonable amount, assuming that you are not eating this vegetable or fruit every day, several times a day, for your entire life. And I do want to mention that because for some people, like with certain kids who are a little finicky, they might only eat strawberries. One day, that fall into the category of probably getting a little bit more than the somebody but it's important to that it looked at, it checked for. I said that the Dirty Dozen list and the Clean 15 list is a really valuable tool, and I have been using it for a long, long time to help my client base make choices when it comes to organics, because it can be very expensive. And you don't want to scare people away from eating fruits and vegetables, right? You want to make sure that they're meeting that basic, minimum amount, but you also want to help them make choices for those foods that are continually on the most contaminated list. I don't know if you guys can see this, but I've had this little cutout piece of paper. I wanted to take it out because I wanted to see, okay, from 10 years ago, what was on my Dirty Dozen list and what's on it now. Strawberries have been on there, pretty continuously. But still, having said that, $10 strawberries in the middle of winter might be a little bit much for some people to swing, but still a useful tool, because if you know that some of your favorite fruits and vegetables are on the lower end of that list and least contaminated, and I will tell you, avocados have been on there for years and years and years. Well, that might help you make a decision, a purchasing decision, like, okay, I'm going to buy that conventionally because my risk of pesticide exposure is really, really low. And I'm going to pull some of that money away. And I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to buy my organic apples because we eat a lot of those. And I know that the pesticide level is higher. So I think it's a useful tool for a lot of us to use in terms of, like I said, that purchasing power and our ability.
Or apple, peaches, and pumpkin pie on that, well, not pie, but pumpkins. Which list do they make?
So apples. The apples have been, I'm looking at my list here. Apples have been on the list. Peppers, I know everyone got all crazy. It's like, oh, peppers are on for the first time. No, they're not. They were on here. This is an old list, but so it's tested every year. This is a test that's done. Again, the Environmental Working Group doesn't do the testing. They're pulling the data from what the USDA has pulled based on EPA standards. So let's see what's on. So top of the strawberries, spinach, kale, and collard greens are at that top of the list a little bit more. So maybe, and lots of brands, like for example, Stop and Shop has got their brand of organics now. Whole Foods has got their brands. Costco's got their brand of organic. So it makes it a little bit more reasonable in terms of the cost. There can be those store brand names can be less money than perhaps a larger farm that might have their brand of organics. So you can price compare.
Question about the store brands. Do they have, let's say a Costco, do they have their own farms, or they use another farm that's organic and then private label the product?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that. I would have to look into and see. I know that Costco procures a lot of their. They have a lot of their own. They have their own vineyard. So I don't want to give a wrong answer. I'd have to look at that. That would be interesting to know. And then at the bottom of the list, a lot of the melons are typically on the clean side. So cantaloupes. Frozen sweet peas, asparagus has been on the lower end of it for a long time. So I would encourage if you're interested, people to go on to, and again, I can post it, I can post the link when, on Courtney on Health, just to give you, it's not meant to be a fearful, it's the whole idea is not, although that's the way it was portrayed in the news. I see this as an opportunity to help people really budget their hard-earned money to maybe choose organic when they can. And even when it comes to locally grown, and I'm hoping to have one of our local farmers on over the next couple of episodes to talk about what local farmers are doing if they can't afford the organic seal because it might be too pricey, and what they're doing to sort of mitigate or minimize some of the use of pesticides that they may be using. So perhaps they're only using pesticides when their crop is at risk of destruction. So they're using less. So it might not be zero, but it's less, and that's a movement in the right direction. So I think these are all things that are starting to, evolve, and it's getting a little bit better. So I think it gives people options in terms of, how to buy their food, where to buy their food, and not this line in the sand, you must buy organic or you're going to die. I think that's a really sort of incendiary, type of philosophy.
There's a something now in the farming world called regenerative farming, and they're going to have something called an EOV, which is an ecological outcome verification, and it's really based on conservation and rehabilitation of how they work the farm. And if you can catch a movie called Biggest Little Farm, it's a
Yes.
popular documentary that kind of gives you an idea. It's a bigger little farm, probably bigger than some of the local people we would have on the show, but it's something that is really piquing the local farmers' interest in ways to grow. Because organic, as you said, is hard. It takes time. It's costly, and a lot of local farmers, they on small farms can't really afford it. So this new thing that they're instituting in a lot of places might be the answer. So we'll see. We'll ask a farmer.
Well,
Ask your farmer.
You're going to ask the farmer. And
Ask a farmer.
I know you're going to wrap us up, Malcolm, soon, but it's worth mentioning because I know glyphosate was in the news. It's worth mentioning that of the pesticides, insecticides, herbicides that are checked from produce that the USDA checks for, of course, which is where this environmental working group list comes from. Glyphosate is not one of the compounds tested. It requires, it's a widely used herbicide, and it requires a very selective residue methodology. So it is tested. It's just not part of this particular list.
But it has been tested and banned in Europe. And it's in Monsanto when you're killing your weeds. You Roundup, I mean, when you go to the stores. So a lot of countries, even countries, Asian countries, have already banned it. The United States, I don't know what they're waiting for, but apparently they want to test more. But there's a lot of testing that's been done, and there's been a lot of scientific research on it. So I'm hoping the U.S. gets its act together about it, because yeah. Anyway,
Again,
just my 2 cents. Sorry.
Another show, right?
It is actually. I did a show on the Many Shades of Green with someone who wrote a book and about it, and she's a very high, well-regarded scientist. So we like to get the science. We like the facts.
So we certainly do. Like,
well, not to expound conspiracy type of things, but in the last administration, the people who headed the various bureaus like the EPA or the USDA, basically were business people. And the business people are more akin to let things go for big business, and farming is, I don't know how much of most of the mega farms versus the smaller farms, but that's big business nowadays. And I don't know how much influence they had in having the people of the EPA or the USDA turn their backs on certain things and accept certain things that they normally wouldn't.
Right.
Right.
Well,
I can't speak to that, and I don't want speak past, my knowledge base. I think, I think there's some good people working, no matter which administration, in the EPA, the USDA, trying to do what they can. These are not a bunch of evil scientists trying to poison the United States. I think,
It's not the scientists, it's the lobbyists.
It's
That's why it's called Big Ag, but that's a whole,
yeah,
again,
it's
different
not the
show.
scientists, it's big business. It's
Well,
a lot of things
that's
are
a
run by
whole-
money.
Yeah, we're getting off on a topic.
Yeah, by
we're
the
not
way, we
really-
can't get off course, we're out of time.
Yeah, well, I think that Courtney needs to post the the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, and as much information that you can put up
Absolutely.
on your where we can get information. Where can we get information, Courtney? Where do we look?
you can always find me on Instagram, CLG Wellness. And if you go to Facebook and search for Courtney on Health, you will find me there as well. And I'll have both, I'll have the information posted in both spots.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
And next week, we're gonna do part 2 of this, right?
Yeah, we're going to do eggs. We're going to do poultry. We're going to talk about meat. So I'm sure more controversial topics we shall touch upon.
I'm trying to stay away from controversy, so it wasn't me.
And then the important thing is it kosher for Passover?
Yeah. Please. That's a whole other board to look at. We need that's the rabbis have to pick that one out. But anyway.
Right, because we're doing this show over the Passover period.
Yeah, that's true. I'm already sick of matzah and it just started. But anyway, if you want, also, aside from at CLG Wellness, you can tweet us at TM Shades of Green and check shows out on malcolmpresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com. And Courtney has amazing information, so follow her, please.
And we can see all the past shows on malcolmpresents.com to see.
That's what I said.
What other pearls of wisdom that has Courtney has delivered to us. Anyway, thank you very much, guys.
All right.
Have a good one. Have a great week. Bye, everyone.
Speak to you next
All
week.
right.
Oh, but by the way, also, just to be ecumenical, happy Easter.
Yeah, happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
Right.
Now, I like
Enjoy
Easter and
the
Passover. I don't
Passover.
like happy holidays. I like
Good.
Christmas and Hanukkah. Bye.
Bye.